The story starts by introducing us to Taiju, the best friend of our protagonist named Senku. Taiju tells him that he is finally going to confess his feelings to Yasuhira after hiding them for about 5 years. But Senku thinks he has been inefficient for taking so long without saying anything and offers him a drug that activates his pheromone secretion to the extreme. But Taiju rejects it since he doesn't want to depend on those tricks. Although afterwards, Senku clarifies that it is gasoline and that he refined it from plastic bottles, and that they should think about the molecular structure of polyethylene since it is like gasoline, but the hydrocarbons are no longer cut, and that it was 10 billion% certain he was not going to drink it. Now we see Taiju approaching Yasuhira, who fears that if he confesses, they might never be friends again. But before he can confess his feelings, he gets distracted by a strange green light he sees in the sky. And what happens next is a ray of energy that covers the entire planet Earth, turning only humans into stone. It is shown that the animals remain intact and that accidents occur all over the world due to the unknown catastrophe. It turns out that Taiju remains conscious even though he is petrified. Decades or hundreds of years pass while everyone stays the same, causing civilization to vanish and nature to take over the entire planet Earth. The next thing we see is Taiju inside a cave, and the stone covering him begins to crumble. When he is finally free, he goes outside and sees everyone who suffered the same fate. Since when he was petrified, he couldn't see or hear anything. There, he puts something on to cover his naked body and walks forward, wanting to find the tree where he last saw Yasuhira. Memories are shown of how before the catastrophe, he had found some stone swallows. Believing it was a disease, he took them to the veterinarian, and that was when Yasuhira appeared. She told him that surely it was a sculpture and not real, but then she showed him that she also had another one just like his. Now in the present, he finally reaches the tree he was looking for and finds Yasuhira turned into stone, sadly. Then he feels relieved that the big tree was able to protect her and decides to confess the words he couldn't say before, telling her that he truly loves her, then clarifying that he plans to save her. But after that, he sees that beside her are some words written, telling him to follow the river downstream. When he does, he finds Senku, who explains that that day is October 5th of the year 5738, and that approximately 3,700 years have passed, and he knows it because he was counting. Then it is shown that while he was turned into stone, he was counting every second that passed until the present, using his brain in parallel to think and count at the same time. He explains to Taiju that if he had awakened naked in winter, he would have died trying to find food. That starting in spring is crucial for survival, and all the necessary information was a precise measurement of time. Then Senku takes him to a place that turns out to be his base, and he says that he built it all by himself from scratch. He mentions that he didn't have enough manpower and that he spent the whole day preparing the shelter, and that he needs a strong man to found a civilization, and he was about 10 billion% sure that Taiju would survive. At that moment, Senku talks about how humanity took 2 million years to go from the Stone Age to the Modern Age, and that they will go full speed to the top so that the world can clearly be restored. He tells him that he will rebuild the world and understand the science behind petrification and rebirth. Later, Taiju starts gathering ingredients and brings them to Senku. After that, Senku begins separating them, explaining that Amanita virosa is poisonous, Buna shimeji is completely edible, and Amanita muscaria is poisonous. Artemisia is edible, and aconite is poisonous. After that, Taiju sees that the mushrooms they eat are very delicious, and Senku clarifies that he obviously seasoned them with sea salt. Then Taiju finds some wild grapes, which he also collects. On the way, he sees a statue of a person he recognizes because he saw him on TV, known as the strongest primate high schooler, named Tetsukasa Shisio. Then he heads to the cave where he woke up and finds a container being filled with liquid dripping from the ceiling. Senku explains that he was the one who put that there, and asks why they were freed from petrification after 3,700 years. Assuming that the material covering them had corroded, it's suspicious that they both revived around the same time, with only 6 months apart after 3,700 years. He explains that both of them ended up in this cave. Then he shows him what was dripping, the miraculous water made from bat droppings, and says that it is nitric acid. There, Senku takes a bottle of this liquid and pours it over a petrified swallow, since he assumes that nitric acid corrodes the stone and causes them to revive, but they see that nothing happens. So he takes Taiju to a storage area where he has a collection of petrified swallows, mentioning that the petrification seems like something out of fantasy, but he doesn't have the equipment to figure out what it really is. He adds that by mixing some liquor alcohol with nitric acid, they could make nitol, which works like an industrial etching agent. Then Taiju gets the idea to show him the grapes he collected, since they can use them to make wine. After that, they start making the wine, which is very simple. Senku explains that it consists of crushing the grapes, transferring the juice to a container, and mixing it daily until it's done. although it would have been a crime to do this without a license in their time. Then 3 weeks pass and Senku mentions that now they're going to distill the wine and start with brandy, which involves heating it, cooling it, and pouring it, since that completely concentrates the alcohol. He explains that the people of Mesopotamia did it using clay jars in the year 3000, clearly referring to 3000 BC. But then, the jar they're using breaks, so they try again. After this, months pass as they dedicate themselves to creating the miraculous liquid, and when the day arrives, they pour that special water onto the petrified swallow. Senku explains that it's not that there are things science can't explain, but rather that one must look for the rules behind them, and that the word science expresses constant effort and the determination needed to achieve it. At that moment, the next thing they see is that the swallow manages to break free and flies into the air. This makes them both rejoice, and Senku, relieved, mentions that it's been years since he started experimenting with all this. Then he tells Taiju that he'll let him choose who to revive, and immediately, Taiju goes straight for Yuzuriha without thinking twice. Senku mentions that he already tested that miraculous water on a shattered statue, but when it revived, it came back only as a corpse, clarifying that he first tried to glue it back together, but it seems those who are broken cannot be saved. They are already dead. Just before reviving her, Taiju pokes Senku in the eyes since she's naked, so they plan to take her to the camp first to dress her. Next, they are ambushed by furious lions and start running away. Taiju is surprised that there are lions in Japan, and Senku explains that they must be from a zoo, and maybe the staff was petrified while opening the cages or something like that. He adds that without humans around, all the herbivores would become their prey, and that in this stone world, humans are no longer at the top of the food chain. Even if they somehow make it back to camp, they'll barely be able to defend themselves with spears. Then Taiju throws Yuzuriha to Senku and offers to distract the lions while he escapes, but Senku tells him that he's the brain and Taiju is the muscle, and he can't afford to lose either of them. So Taiju changes direction while running and proposes to revive the strongest primate high schooler, clearly referring to Tatsukasa Shishio. There, he apologizes to Yuzuriha because they first need someone who can fight and help them survive. After that, they pour the miraculous water on Tatsukasa while being surrounded by lions. As soon as Tatsukasa begins to awaken, the first thing he calmly and directly asks is what the situation is. Senku replies that his body is covered with mineral and that there are lions from 9 to 12 o'clock. The next thing Tatsukasa does is break free from the mineral covering his body and use his strength to throw those rocks at great speed toward the lions. After that, he runs at incredible speed toward one of them and sends it flying into a tree with a powerful blow. This causes the other lions to flee in fear, leaving Senku and Taiju astonished by what they just witnessed. Tatsukasa then tells them they can explain everything later and promises that they'll never be in danger again, because from that moment on, he'll fight for them. Senku later talks privately with Taiju, saying that Tatsukasa is incredibly strong, but could also be dangerous since he was able to defeat a lion with his bare hands. In a world without weapons, Tatsukasa would be absolutely unstoppable, 10 billion%. After that, Tatsukasa asks if they have any tool for cutting while inspecting the lion he struck, and Senku mentions that eating lion meat isn't poisonous, but it's very tough, smells like ammonia, and tastes awful, and he knows that because he once went to Africa to study Ebola. There, Tatsukasa explains that even though it was in self-defense, he ended the lion's life with his own hands and wants to honor the circle of life by making use of everything. Then Senku approaches him and gives him a stone knife. When they return to the base, Tatsukasa formally introduces himself to them, and they do the same. He notices that they're having trouble finding food. The next thing he does is start hunting animals with his superhuman strength, kicking wild boars to catch them, leaping high into the treetops to catch birds, and even spearing piranhas and other fish underwater. He tells them that from now on, he'll take care of fighting and hunting, and now that he's with them, they won't have to worry about such problems anymore. Later, Taiju notices that if they fry the fish immediately, there's no need to refrigerate them, but Senku explains that it's not that. He uses the aldehyde in the smoke to kill microbes, meaning they're actually smoking the meat. After that, Tatsukasa approaches carrying a large rock and suddenly breaks it in half with a powerful blow. Then he sees that there was a petrified woman inside and apologizes for scaring them, since a person was trapped beneath the rock. Once they finish eating, Senku asks what the most important thing in a technological civilization is, and he clarifies that it's calcium carbonate, also called lime, which is the same substance used to mark sports fields. Then Taiju says that he just needs to go to a gym storage room to get that material, but Senku explains that obviously that's not possible since about 3,700 years have passed. He shows them that if they crush seashells into powder, they'll get calcium carbonate. After that, Taiju begins collecting a large amount of shells to grind them, filling entire bags with calcium carbonate. That's when Senku explains that it has 4 incredible and useful applications for their situation. First is in agriculture. It's used to deal with hydrogen ions, meaning it makes the soil better. Second is in construction. If burned with sand, it creates mortar, which is basically a primitive cement. With that, they can build large furnaces and houses. third is for making soap. They need to gather sodium carbonate from seaweed, mix it with oil, and that's it. He says that getting sick in this world would be game over, so once they make a piece of soap, he tells them it will clearly protect them from germs and that it's a stone of life for them. At that moment, Tatsukasa tells Senku that he's an incredible person and that when he saved him earlier, he was able to explain the situation without fear and that he has never met anyone as smart as him. But then Senku replies that when a man openly praises another, it's because he's plotting something. Tatsukasa answers that he's not planning anything bad. He just feels that Senku could build a modern civilization from nothing and simply wanted to say that. Shortly after, Taiju arrives and asks Senku what the fourth use for the shells is, and upon hearing that, Senku corrects him, saying that there are actually only 3 uses and that he must have heard wrong. The next morning, Tatsukasa talks privately with Senku on the beach. There, he tells him that they are free in this stone world, and that the shells never belong to anyone, neither did the sea or the land. He then tells him that once there was a poor boy who wanted to make a shell necklace for his sister, who was going to have surgery, and his sister loved mermaids. Then a man with fishing rights came along, reeking of alcohol, and assumed the boy was trying to steal the shells. He beat him so badly that he became unrecognizable and was never able to turn his sister into a mermaid. Right after that, Tatsukasa becomes angry, and with a single strike knocks the head off a petrified man. Seeing this, Senku tells him that he hopes he knows what he's doing, because he just took a man's life. Then he replies that he knows and asks Senku if he plans to bring everyone back, including the adults with dirty hearts. He says that at first everyone was grateful, but once civilization returns, the rich and powerful will say, "That was my land, pay your rent and pay taxes," and they'll once again steal the future from the poor youth. He says they can't go back to that world, this is paradise, and they will only revive the young and pure of heart to live in a natural world that belongs to no one. This, he says, is their chance to truly purify humanity. After that, he tries to strike another petrified man, but Senku stops him and responds that he completely disagrees. He says he's a boy who loves technology, who gets excited about robots, space, and things like that, and that he'll use the power of science to save everyone, although in his head, he's already thinking that Tatsukasa is going to be a big problem for them. Still, if they hadn't awakened him, the lions would have killed them, and they had no other choice. He wants to help the young and assumes they'll be able to control Tatsukasa until he learns about the revival fluid. Senku tells himself he must keep the secret of the miracle water, even if he dies. Right after that, Taiju runs toward them to announce that he already has a boat full of miracle water from the cave and that they can finally revive Yuzuhira. This leaves Senku more than petrified because Taiju just did exactly what he least wanted to happen. There, Tatsukasa asks him what the miracle water is, and Senku, now calmer, says that instead of explaining it, it's better to show him. When they gather where Yuzuhira is, she's already dressed, but Senku tells Taiju that the miracle water is only enough for one person and asks him to go fetch more while he and Tatsukasa play word chain. But before Taiju leaves, Tatsukasa stops him and explains that since he's faster, it's better if he goes. Senku knew he would say that because if Tatsukasa discovers the source of the revival liquid, it's 10 billion% certain that he'll try to stop his plan to save everyone. After Tatsukasa heads to the cave, Senku quickly begins preparing the miracle water to bring Yuzuhira back. With great speed, Tatsukasa reaches the cave and sees the water dripping from the ceiling near the bats. It turns yellow when it touches his finger, and then he smells it. He deduces that the so-called miracle water is actually nitric acid. Back with Senku, he explains to Taiju that he lied about not having enough liquid to make the miracle water, because he wants to revive Yuzuhira while Tatsukasa isn't around, since Tatsukasa is too much to control and Senku has no interest in his vision of a great new world. Upon hearing that, Taiju says Senku doesn't need to explain anything else because he trusts him, and that something important must have happened while he was gone. Then Senku tells Tatsukasa that he's both a good guy and a killer, and it's shown how Tatsukasa ends the lives of many petrified people near the cave. Shortly after, they create the miracle water and pour it over Yuzuhira, but after a few seconds, nothing happens. Then Senku tells them not to worry since it takes time to react. It's like a kind of cryostasis, a protective bed made from traces of metallic elements in the body. An enigmatic phase change in those elements keeps the petrification intact. Although it's just a hypothesis based on a year of experiments, if one part receives the nitol and breaks, it will trigger a cascading reaction that completely ends the petrification. At that moment, Yuzuhira is finally freed, and Taiju catches her in his arms. He apologizes for making her wait about 3,700 years, but she says she doesn't understand anything since she just woke up. Still, she feels she knows what's going on, realizes he helped her, and thanks him. Shortly after, Senku explains that there are 2 options. Plan A, Taiju and Yuzuhira escape immediately and live somewhere far away. Plan B, they fight together to stop Tatsukasa's killings using the power of civilization's weapons. Right away, Taiju decides they should fight together, and Yuzuhira, though she doesn't fully understand what's happening, also agrees. She says that whether he's killing people depends on perspective. To Tatsukasa, he's simply selecting people for the new world. After that, Taiju sees pieces of petrified people falling from Tatsukasa's hand, and this makes him run straight toward him, telling the others to flee. Despite that, Senku knows Taiju has no chance of defeating him, so he takes out a simple crossbow he secretly built and fires between Tatsukasa and Taiju to separate them. Tatsukasa reacts with incredible speed, spinning around, catching the arrow midair, and stabbing it into the ground. Then he keeps spinning and charges at Taiju with a powerful kick that sends him flying back. Even so, Tatsukasa is surprised to see Taiju still standing and tells him he's the first person to stay on his feet after taking one of his kicks. But it wasn't that Taiju didn't want to fight, it's that he chose not to. He explains that he doesn't hit people, and that Tatsukasa can kick or punch him if he wants, but he must stop destroying the human statues. Hearing this, Tatsukasa realizes Taiju's intention, to let himself be hit without fighting back so Tatsukasa will stop breaking the statues. But Tatsukasa tells him he doesn't understand because he's not making any deal. Then he asks what would happen if he said he planned to kill the girl who was just revived. This makes Yuzuriha understand why Senku told them to run away. Shortly after, Taiju collapses unconscious on the ground, and Senku explains that Tatsukasa's blow did in fact have an effect, and that he'll have to let him rest for a few days. Seeing this, Tatsukasa says it's better not to fight among themselves and asks Taiju to focus on protecting Yuzuriha and forget about the statues of strangers. He'll do what he must, and they should not interfere. Then he departs. Senku explains that the crossbow bolt flew at over 200 kilometers per hour, and yet Tatsukasa caught it with his bare hands. After that, Senku starts stomping on Taiju to try to wake him, which works easily and stops him when he attempts to go after Tatsukasa again. Senku tells both of them there's only one way to stop a monster in the stone world: advance civilization and manufacture scientific weapons. They return to base and begin smashing the jars. Senku says they should make it look like they went crazy because of Tatsukasa and fled with the food, and act. If they can build scientific weapons before Tatsukasa finds out, they'll win. If he discovers their plan, they lose. He then tells them they'll go to a cone for materials for the weapons, just a grand 80-kilometer adventure. Along the way, Yuzuriha notices the cherry trees look very different, and Senku explains that the cherries they knew, called Prunus degenuensis, no longer self-fertilize and likely went extinct. In a more open area, Senku pulls out a sextant and says 35,970 seconds have passed since sunrise, and that a sextant must determine position by time, pointing out how ridiculously imprecise it is, and that there are no buildings left because the metal rusted away. Suddenly, Yuzuriha sees something familiar. They head quickly there and notice that for some reason, there are no trees in that zone. When they arrive, Senku knows exactly where they are and says they're at 35°19 north, 139°32 east. In the middle of that place stands a statue of a great Buddha. Seeing it, Yuzuriha begins to remember moments with her family in that area and feels what's happening is surreal. Senku says the statue is made of bronze, which doesn't decompose scientifically, and that nothing green grows around it because it releases a lot of copper ions, which are poisonous to plants. After that, they continue their long route and later reach a river. Taiju notices that Yuzuriha's foot is still petrified. He sprinkles a bit of the miracle water on it, which loosens the stone, and she clearly feels the pain leave. Senku explains that small cracks seal up when petrification reverses, and shows them that they are still alive even if their faces are split. Now Tatsukasa arrives at their base, sees all the evidence around, and says they fled in fear. Or that's what they want him to believe. He concludes Senku plans to use science to make weapons and confront him. Meanwhile, the kids finally reach their destination, some hot springs. Senku explains they're going to make guns and that they'll make gunpowder. The Stone Age was 2 million years ago, and gunpowder was invented only around the year 700 AD. In other words, they're about to skip 1,998 years and 700 days of civilization's progress. Later it's shown that Tatsukasa, carefully tracking their trail, learns exactly where they're headed and suspects their plan to make gunpowder, because then he won't stand a chance and he must stop Senku before he succeeds. Back with Senku, he continues explaining that luckily there are many volcanoes in Japan, and if they go to hot springs, they'll have a plentiful supply of sulfur, the main ingredient to make gunpowder and the birth of their best anti-Tatsukasa weapon, black powder. Later, Taiju and Yuzuriha bathe completely separate from each other in the hot springs, and he reminds her of the moment he wanted to tell her something 3,700 years before they were petrified, that during all that time, he planned to finish what he wanted to say, but in that stonified world with nowhere to go, he wouldn't feel right saying it as a man, and that they must first restore civilization. Then he asks her if, when they save humanity, She will let him say what he wanted to tell her 3,700 years ago. She becomes happy and answers yes, and that they will definitely save humanity. The next day, Senku lets them know that they have the 3 materials needed for gunpowder and that they just need to mix them to create it. The number 1 ingredient of gunpowder is sulfur, of which there is plenty in the hot spring water. Number 2 is charcoal, and for that you just have to burn wood and that's it. And number 3 is the hardest, potassium nitrate, and it will honestly cost quite a lot to make, but he's already prepared a bit more to save time and says he obtained it thanks to the nitric acid from the cave. Then he mixes those 3 ingredients and adds a pinch of sugar to give it more flavor, which is glucose he clearly made from the grapes. Suddenly Mecha Senku appears and explains that the recipe he gave actually works and that it could literally be a bomb. He then warns the public not to even think about trying it. Now finally, they have to grind everything so it hardens. Taiju holds a large stone and says he plans to do it by himself. This scares Yuzuriha, who thinks the gunpowder might explode if he creates a spark with flint. But Senku explains there won't be sparks if you hit stone with stone. Then Taiju strikes the gunpowder with the rock and sees that it's real. Senku tells him that flint is more than just a stone and that there won't be a spark without metal, but shortly after he thinks there might be iron pyrite in the hot springs since they're near a volcano, and they consider Taiju's enormous strength. Even so, it's already too late, because after 1 strike, Taiju ignites the gunpowder. They then flee quickly to escape the large explosion that occurs immediately afterward. Senku explains that they're not going to attack Tatsukasa with it, but rather make a deal, since Tatsukasa isn't a ruthless killer, and as long as they have gunpowder, they'll have an advantage. Although in his thoughts he says that if negotiations fail, they'll have to do whatever it takes to survive. It's shown that Tatsukasa is still heading toward them and reaches the same conclusion as Senku. If things get worse, they'll have to do what's necessary, and it will be kill or be killed. Suddenly, Senku and the others see a smoke signal in the distance, but they know it isn't Tatsukasa because it's in the opposite direction. Then they realize there is someone else in this stone world. There, Yuzura and Taiju try to put out the fire from the explosion, but Zenku tells them not to, that as far as those people know, the explosion could have been from the volcano and they should warn them before they leave. And that if Tatsukasa pursues them, he'll be able to tell exactly where they are, so he asks them to light it to send a smoke signal. Now it's revealed that Tatsukasa knows Zenku wants to make gunpowder, which the shells clearly gave away, since earlier he had told him they had 4 uses but then lied saying there were only 3, and hid it because he knew he would be a threat, and it's easy to deduce. For example, mass-producing potassium nitrate for gunpowder. Shortly after, he sees the smoke signal and later appears before Zenku, holding Yuzura at spear point. Tatsukasa asks him to hand over the recipe for the survival fluid and also for reviving humans. But Zenku tells him he won't give it up since he only thinks logically and he doesn't care what he does with Yuzura. Although right after that, Tatsukasa, with great speed and precision, cuts Yuzuriha's hair, which makes Senku get scared, and he tells him not to try to negotiate and that he never tried to bury Yuzuriha. He explains that his best option would have been to bury her somewhere far away from where she was, and that way Tatsukasa would never have taken her as a hostage, and that it's impossible that he didn't think of something that Senku did, yet he didn't do it. And the reason must have been because of Taiju and her, and that although he says he acts with logic, he actually has friends by his side, while Tatsukasa has admirers, but none that close to him. Shortly after, Yuzuriha takes the spear and points it at her neck and asks Senku not to tell him anything, since as long as he doesn't have the recipe for the revival fluid, he won't be able to kill him, and that he must survive to secure everyone's future. Despite this, in the end, Senku explains to Tatsukasa that the fluid is a compound of nitric acid and alcohol. He must filter the miraculous water from the cave and mix it with ethyl alcohol as close to 96% as possible, and it's 30% miraculous water and 70% alcohol, and if it goes a bit off, there will be no reaction, so he must fine-tune it with a petrified swallow feather. After hearing this, Tatsukasa thanks him and tells him that now he no longer has any reason to let him live. It is shown that Taiju is collecting wood and suddenly sees 3 smoke signals in the distance. On the other hand, Tatsukasa approaches Senku and asks if he can promise not to develop civilization if he lets him live, knowing that he would never lie to science. Then he asks him again if at that moment and place he promises to abandon science forever, since if he does, he won't have to end him. But suddenly we are shown Senku's past, where as a child he showed himself to be extremely intelligent, and in class said that he would go to the moon, and that he would go right now. And his father, seeing his talent, began to support him, and even sold his car to use the money to give Senku all the necessary equipment. Later on, it is shown that he is advancing in the technology he is creating, and that was when he met Taiju, who came to defend him from some bullies. After some years, Yuzuriha also began joining Senku's experiments, when he was already progressing in creating his rocket that would go into space, and she was very good at crafts and made miniature dolls of the 3 of them. After several failed attempts, he managed to send one into space along with the dolls of the 3 of them together. Already in the present, Senku answers Tatsukasa that he cannot make the promise to abandon science forever, and then asks him to end his life without suffering, since that would be ideal. And upon hearing this, Tatsukasa tells him not to worry, because he will break his cervical nerve with one blow. That way he will lose consciousness instantly and then die, and thus he will not suffer. But at that moment, Taiju has a bad feeling and runs quickly toward them. But while this happens, Tatsukasa finishes delivering the final blow to Senku. When Taiju arrives, he holds Senku's lifeless body in his arms and begins to cry together with Yuzuriha. Shortly after that, the next thing he does is grab a large rock tightly and automatically apologizes to Yuzuriha, but she tells him that she understands and that the three of them had promised to stay together in this battle. What Taiju does is throw the rock high into the sky, while Tatsukasa stays on guard, watching him at all times. On the other hand, Yuzuriha runs directly towards Senku's scientific equipment to grab it and also throws the bag full of black gunpowder toward Tatsukasa. He destroys it with a kick, and that's when Taiju says goodbye to him. After that, the rock that was in the sky falls to the ground and reacts with the black gunpowder, causing a powerful explosion. And shortly after, Tatsukasa sees that they managed to escape thanks to this commotion, and that this was their objective so that he wouldn't hurt them. It shows Taiju running with Senku in his arms together with Yuzuriha, since for him, Senku is still not dead. Meanwhile, Tatsukasa doesn't understand the point of them running away, as he is sure he broke Senku's cervical nerve and that there's no way to revive him in that stone world, especially not even without medicine. At that moment, it starts to rain and Taiju lays Senku on the ground to try to revive him. And Yuzuriha explains that he should keep his neck still, since Tatsukasa hit him there. She also says that Senku sacrificed himself for her, and upon hearing her, Taiju remembers something that happened in the past, before 3,700 years ago. One of the students gave them a psychology test from a book, which said that if an accident occurred and only you, your partner, or your friend could be saved, who would you choose? Taiju and Yuzuriha didn't really know the answer, but Senku replied that he would save everyone before saving himself or his own life, and that he would look for the fundamental rule that would save them all. Already in the present, as Taiju remembers that, he thinks that Senku would never commit suicide nor sacrifice himself, but instead would bet on a way to save everyone. And after thinking for a while, Yuzuriha says that she believes Senku provoked Tatsukasa to attack him in the neck. And they both remember the habit Senku had of cracking his neck all the time and that he didn't have that habit before. Then upon checking him, they realize that there's still some petrification left on his neck. And upon seeing that, they remember when they removed the petrification from Yuzuriha's foot, where Senku had said that the cracks repaired themselves when the petrification was undone. And after that, Yuzuriha gives Taiju the revival fluid, and he applies it to Senku's neck, since they believe that it could work on his neck when the petrification is undone. And when the stone breaks, they both shout to Senku to wake up. In a change of scene, we return to the moment when Senku had just been freed from his petrification after 3,700 years, where, once freed and seeing the rock above him, he says that his own body is a clue worth its weight in gold, and marks the exact position of the place where he woke up and the order in which the stone left his body. Later on, it is shown that he keeps track of every second that passed since he was petrified, and in addition to that, the Earth's rotation becomes 1,700 thousandths slower each year. He marks a tree noting that this day is April 1st, 5738 AD, and that this day is year 0 since everything starts there. After that, he tries to create fire with wood but realizes that he doesn't have as much strength or endurance as Taiju and ends up getting tired. Then he begins hitting a rock with a stone, trying many times, explaining that he can remove the edges in the air and sharpen both sides by striking it against a surface, and that he must use the right stone for the job, and that this colorful flint is very strong and there's nothing better to make a small knife. And with that, he finally obtains stone tools. After that, he creates rope by using vines and braiding them properly. Thanks to that, he makes a kind of bow that helps him try to create fire, which works by generating heat through the gases of cellulose. In other words, combustion. Over time, he starts making traps to catch deer and use their meat as food and their skin to make clothes. And little by little, he begins building the foundation to have everything ready, obtaining food, clothing, and shelter. But then he realizes that a single human can barely get through the day, and that if he had someone else with great strength, everything would be much different. That's when he finds a muscular hand sticking out of the ground next to where he revived, and he uses a shovel to dig in that spot. And just as he expected, it turns out to be Taiju, which makes him very happy since the chance of them ending up so close together was very low. Then he asks himself, what was it that petrified humans 3,700 years ago? Number 1, an attack using extraterrestrial technology. Number 2, a military weapon from some country that went wrong, and number 3, a new strain of virus, and the only thing that's certain is that it only attacked humans and swallows. It seems like a very absurd fantasy, but it must have a rule and he might be able to face it, or there might even be a cure. After that, he starts thinking about how he stopped being petrified and that if it had been because of deterioration, the exposed surface would have broken first. But the statues are completely made of stone, and in his case, the surface remained stone while the rest turned into living cells. That's when he realizes it's the opposite. The surface was too deteriorated to turn back into cells, and that's why it became a stone shell, and the parts that were less petrified reverted to cells, which means there must be missing pieces from the shell. So he didn't revive because of deterioration, but because of some special external factor, and he sees that the fragments closest to his head are piled on the ground. In other words, the revival started from the head. At that moment, when he sees a bat come out of the cave, he notices that there's more further ahead and decides to investigate, and realizes that what is dripping there, by its smell, is nitric acid, and that the hair on the back of his neck is still petrified. So what he does is pull out a lock of petrified hair and place it under the drops falling from the nitric acid, discovering that the petrification of the hair strand dissolves. After this, he places a clay jar to collect that liquid. But when he pours that liquid over Taiju, he sees that nothing happens, and the same goes for the swallows. And he wonders why only he needed nitric acid. After thinking for a while, he understands that it's because he was thinking, that he remained conscious for 3,700 years while counting all that time, and that the brain burns about 400 calories a day, and that over 3,700 years, that's about 2 terajoules. And he wonders where all that energy came from. Then he mentions the formula that would be E equals mc squared, something that a full scientific mathematician would say, and explains that energy and mass have an equivalent exchange, which is the basis of the science traced by Einstein, that there is no way to create energy from nothing, and that there must be something in the stone that it consumed to power his brain, and that if he discovers it, he will be able to undo the petrification of all human beings. After a long time investigating, that's when he tried again to revive Taiju. Now we return to the present, where Taiju and Yuzura are still waiting for Senku to wake up and see, after a few seconds, that the storm above them disappears. There they hear Senku telling them that the storm, which served as camouflage, has passed, and to keep their voices down because Tatsukasa could hear them, and shortly after they realize that Senku has finally revived, and they are very happy for this miracle. After that, Yuzura shows him that the leather she used to carry things has a drawing that looks like a rocket, and then she uses it to hold Senku's neck along with a wooden stick to keep it straight. Although Senku tells her that he's already fine and that the regenerative effect from undoing the petrification is very high. Later, Yuzura sees a shattered petrified body and starts to put it back together, mentioning that if that fixed Senku's neck, maybe if they put the broken statues together and use the revival liquid, they might be able to bring them back. But Senku tells her that he already tried that at the beginning and it only brought back a torn apart corpse, though shortly after he thinks of something and approaches her, telling her that she's an extremely skilled member of the crafts club. There, he lets her know that it will be a very demanding mission and asks if she'll be able to do it, whispering to her what it's about. Shortly after, she starts trembling and says that yes, it's something very demanding, but that she's going to do it, and tells Taiju that she thought they should go see Tatsukasa. But when he hears her, Taiju gets nervous and shakes her while asking why, since Tatsukasa is a dangerous man. Senku explains that thanks to what happened, Tatsukasa believes that he's dead, while he himself can always know where he'll be, and that they have a great advantage in the battle if Taiju and Yuzura infiltrate his empire as spies. Then he tells Yuzura the details of the mission and asks Taiju to protect her, since it's better if he doesn't know everything. Then he tells them that Tatsukasa plans to use the miraculous water to create an army of young people to build a new world, and that to defeat Tatsukasa's empire and stop them, they will create a revolutionary army to fight them using science. And what Senku will do is search for the mysterious people who made the smoke signals and clearly bring them to his side. In short, Senku will go alone to find allies for a scientific army, while Taiju and Yuzura will be spies in Tatsukasa's empire. Once they separate, Taiju gets Zenku's attention so that he sees him raise his fist. Upon seeing this, Zenku makes a flag with the leather that has the rocket drawn on it to raise it in the air. Now it shows that Tatsukasa realizes someone is spying on him nearby and clearly asks them to come out. A girl he doesn't know appears and approaches him with a bouquet of flowers, but suddenly she pulls stone knives from the flowers and confronts him. The girl tells him that she saw him take that woman hostage and mercilessly ended the life of the knight who took her place. And even though she didn't hear what they were saying, she doesn't care about their story, and demands that he apologize to the Wizard Knight until his soul rots, saying that recently the two of them invoked the mountain's wrath with a suspicious black powder. After hearing her, Tatsukasa says that perhaps she is not one of the revived, but one of his children. Then he tells her no, and asks which generation she is from, while he believes this girl is from a pure and primitive village without science, and that it could clearly be easily ruled and could also be defeated by him, but there is no reason to attack them. His immediate objective is to return to the cave that Taiju and Yuzuhira saw where gunpowder is made, and he must obtain the miraculous water before that. Then he says goodbye to her and strikes her to make her fall to the ground. Immediately after, with a powerful cut, he knocks down a tree to fall on her and then withdraws from there. Senku sees this and decides to approach the place to help her. There, the girl is unharmed because she is in a crack in the ground, which protected her from the weight of the huge trunk above, but clearly trapped her as well. Seeing them, she realizes that the Wizard Knight who protected the woman is clearly Taiju. But Senku tells her to conserve energy if he asks whether she can hold out until night. In response, she says her organs and bones are fine and that she can endure it. Then Senku begins working to save her. As he cuts an axe from part of the trunk, which weighs approximately 1 ton, lifting one side will take 500 kilos. Assuming her weight is 60 kilos multiplied by 2 to the third power. To have 500 kilos, it will barely work with 3. The bamboo is quite strong and he will have to fill it with soil. He also uses soap with the ropes he had created to join them in a kind of pulley made with bamboo and wooden trunks, explaining to her that this is science, invented by the old Archimedes a few hundred years before Christ, which converts weak force into a Herculean student's power, and that this is called a pulley. After that, he jumps from the tree while holding the rope, and his weight moves the pulleys that hold the trunk, lifting it into the air, which frees her. She tells him that she is impressed by his unwavering diligence in following each step until solving a problem, and introduces herself as Kohaku. Although later she clarifies to Senku that she only finds him pleasant and will collaborate with him, since Senku believes she is in love with him. This relieves him, but she tells him that there is nothing more illogical or troublesome than relationships. At night, Kohaku tells him that she likes his way of living, but she doesn't trust him and that it has always been a habit to take care of herself. Then she lets him know that she will help him fight the long-haired man, clearly referring to Tatsukasa. In response, Senku explains that he first needs to create a nation of science and that he needs labor. Upon hearing this, she understands that he requires allies and then asks him to let her accompany him. The next day, she takes him to some hot springs so she can fill a large jar with hot water. She explains that she takes it home for a hot spring bath for healing purposes, and that it is for her sister, who has been very sick lately. On the way, Senku calculates that the container is just under 50 liters, and that it is not enough for a bath. He then asks how many trips she makes daily with such a heavy barrel. She replies that it is part of her training and that she is very strong because of it. But seeing that she is weakened by what happened, he decides to quickly build a basic transport vehicle, making it easier to carry the water down the hill, which he can do thanks to the wheels of the pulleys he used before. Later, she shows him that they are close, and in the distance, a village can be seen. He asks how many people are there, and Kohaku tells him that, excluding children and the elderly, there are about 40. Senku thinks that she and the others don't seem to have modern technology, so it's not a settlement of revived people, and there must have been a first generation before, but he wonders where they came from. After this, they arrive at the entrance, and suddenly Senku is attacked by 2 guards, but Kohaku defends him with great speed and asks them to stop the violence since this man saved her. The blonde man is Ginro and the black-haired man is Kinro, but they tell them that they cannot do that and that they do not allow strangers as that is the rule. In response, Senku uses a piece of soap along with the hot water and begins to create countless bubbles in the air. This leaves them completely amazed and easily distracted by the spheres, which they find very suspicious. Seeing this, Senku is convinced that he will be able to use them to build his scientific army. Shortly after, a boy appears, introducing himself as the toughest wizard around named Chrome, who quickly comes over upon seeing what was happening from the coast. Kohaku explains to Senku that he is the one who had been speaking to her yesterday. Then Chrome tells the others not to be afraid, that the bubbles are created from coal foam and that he will not accept anyone defeating him in wizardry, warning that the villagers could get trapped if they fight there. So he takes them to another location. At that moment, in front of a campfire, he begins changing the fire to different colors by throwing something into it. Seeing this, Ginro is very impressed and also frightened, but Senku says that it is just a reaction test and that he threw salt, sulfur, and copper, in that order, and that the copper he used comes from the blue crystals in the caves. Shortly after, Chrome is more than surprised and wonders how he knows about the blue crystals and if he might be reading his mind. Then he runs straight to his hut next door to return with his sphere, which he begins rubbing with his hands and arms, and then brings his finger close to Ginro to generate a small electric current. But when Senku takes this sphere, he sees that it is a sulfur ball, which is made by putting the previous sulfur in a pot and melting it with heat. Once cooled, it hardens and cracks on the outer layer to be used, and it functions as an aesthetic generator with a sulfur ball, which was invented around the 15th or 17th century. Later he explains that it will produce 10 billion times more power if rubbed with leather. Then he uses the leather from the flag to rub the sphere at high speed, which makes his hair start to rise from static electricity. At that moment, Senku sees that Chrome has collected all kinds of minerals and materials on his own, which seem very interesting, and that even if Tatsukasa destroys science and everyone completely, there will always be someone like Chrome who experiments from scratch and rebuilds civilization. Then Chrome, having nothing to lose, challenges Senku to an arithmetic duel. If Chrome wins, Senku must leave, and if Senku wins, Chrome will give him his hut and everything so that he can live there with everyone in the village. As expected, Senku easily wins and gains the hut and also brings Chrome with him. There, Senku is amazed while inspecting all the materials in the hut and later begins melting gold dust and mercury in front of the village entrance, placing the tip of Kinro's spear in the pot so that it soon turns golden. He explains that this is useless because clearly its name means gold, and he thought it would be useful. Although Kinro tells him that he won't accept it and that rules are rules, Chrome says that this won't work with Kinro because he only talks about energies and is very rigid. A little later, Senku also sees plants in the hut that are traditional medicines. Chrome tells him that he wasn't sure if they would work, but he tried them on his body, collected the 3 that were very good, and will gather everything if it helps Ruri, which is why he became a wizard. Meanwhile, Kohaku carries the hot water to her sister, Ruri. She asks her guards to leave her alone with her sister, but they refuse, since clearly the priestess cannot be alone. In the end, they are convinced by Ruri, who insists that Kohaku is her sister. Once alone, she runs worried toward Kohaku because their hair clearly looks different and something serious must have happened for it to be undone. This is because Kohaku took an extra day to reach the village, so clearly something happened to her with Tatsukasa. Soon after, Ruri begins coughing and shows herself to be in very poor condition. Back with Chrome, he asks Senku if there is a way to save her, and Senku replies that it depends on her illness. Shortly after, he decides to tell Chrome everything about what happened 3,700 years ago, before the world collapsed. Once he finishes recounting everything, he explains that nothing has disappeared, that everything is still there, and that humanity will not fall so easily. The 2 million years of human history are right in their heads and in him as well, and they are going to save Ruri by making the best medicine using the science of antibiotics. Now it shows that Kohaku's father learns from the guards that Kohaku was the one who brought the outsiders and is very angry with her. So much so that he disinherits her and she still does not follow the rules. Shortly after, Ruri, who is there, falls to the ground and begins coughing heavily. Meanwhile, Kohaku and Chrome decide to support Senku in creating the super medicine to save Ruri. This makes Senku start formulating an idea in his head. If he saves the priestess Ruri, he will gain the entire village on his side for his plans. He then explains that what they will make is an antibiotic, which is the scientific marvel that kills bacteria infecting people and has saved hundreds of millions of lives since its discovery in the early 20th century. They cannot do blood tests and do not know what disease it is, but it is worth trying at least. There are 2 routes to make an antibiotic: the biological route, which makes penicillin from living beings, and the stone route, which makes sulfa from stones. Penicillin is the most famous and is made from green mold, but making it in that stone world requires a lot of luck. On the other hand, the stone route requires much work and labor, but even so, it ensures that they will obtain some kind of medicine in that world. They decide to take the stone route, gathering each requirement patiently and skipping 2 billion years of history. Senku then creates a scientific sheet on the ground, outlining the steps to follow. That night, Senku tells them that the planet moves and that they don't fly off because of gravity. He shows them the North Star in the sky, which points north with near certainty. Kohaku, however, notices that it seems slightly off from north. Upon hearing this, Senku realizes something and mentions that the Earth's axis seems to have shifted, that the whole planet tilted over the last 3,700 years, and that the North Star moved. That is why he could not orient himself before and lost his way to Okone. Then he asks how he knows that the former North Star does not point north, and Chrome explains that he obtained a stone on a bare mountain, which he places on a leaf floating on water, and for some reason, if it hangs or floats, it always points north. Seeing this, Senku tells him that it is a magnet and is pleased with this discovery. Later, they go to the river and use magnets under the water to attract minerals to them. Then Senku tells them that they need to collect iron sand as it is one of the materials required. However, since it is just the 3 of them, it will take all day to gather the mineral, and they cannot ask for help because they are treated as wizards. Later, Senku notices a watermelon floating in the water. It turns out to be a girl named Suika, whom Kohaku recognizes, and she always carries a watermelon on her head. She tells him that she wants to help, but never feels she can do anything useful because of what she has on her head. Senku thanks her and says that the scientific kingdom does not ignore anyone. Hearing this, Suika notices that he is the first person to accept her and doesn't even think to ask why she wears it on her head. As she begins helping, she starts saying Don Barako, and Chrome asks if she thinks she is Momotaro upon hearing it. Senku then asks who taught them about Momotaro, and they reply that Ruri told them about him. Senku asks how they know about gorillas, and they say they have never seen one. At this point, Senku thinks it must be a story with a moral to warn them about animals. Kohaku tells Ruri that she used to tell them many stories and also taught them complicated words. This makes Senku very interested in Ruri and reinforces that he truly must save her. Hearing this, Chrome asks if he means that Senku is clearly trying to save Ruri, or that he might be interested in her, and Kohaku tells Senku that it seems Chrome likes Ruri. Later, they gather a large amount of black sand. Senku explains that iron is obtained by mixing 4 parts iron sand with 1 part charcoal and then baking it, but it will be very difficult because the maximum temperature achievable by burning wood is 700 degrees, while converting the sand into iron requires 1,500 degrees. To solve this, they will have to blow air to double the fire's power from 700 to 1,500 degrees, and Senku gives everyone a tool for blowing air. When everyone starts blowing with all their strength, they are told that they will need to continue for about 20 to 30 more hours. By the next day, they realize that no progress has been made and understand that manpower is essential. After that, Senku and Chrome approach Ginro, who is half asleep, and think that the best way is to use the bait of science to recruit people. Senku mentions that they need information about what the villagers want in order to attract them. Hearing this, Suika explains that she is good at that and can transform into a watermelon to go anywhere. Senku, calling her Detective Suika, assigns her the mission to gather more people as staff. She spends the entire day spying on the villagers and observing what each wants. At night, she returns to Senku and reports the information she obtained. First, the Garnet, Zafira, and Ruby sisters. They want a boyfriend. One wants a strong man, another wants a handsome man, and the last one wants someone who will clearly feed her. Senku thinks he might have a chance with the girl who wants food and asks what exactly she wants. Suika replies that she wants a fish feast. He said that he is bored of eating fish every day and explains that food is science, asking them where they think the umami in the fish they eat comes from, which is glutamic acid and inosinic acid. Then he notices Suika playing with something with the dog and asks exactly what it is. She tells him that it is Chalk's favorite toy, Millet Dogtail, although he corrects her, saying that it is actually called Foxtail. Senku says that it will work and explains that they will be able to make the most delicious dish that everyone in his old world loved. The next day, they go to collect a large amount of this plant. Then, they start grinding it with a rock, and Senku explains that millet is a genuine grain. After preparation, what they obtain is millet flour. He then adds wild eggs and potassium carbonate, creating a scientific dish accidentally made by some Mongol in the 15th century or so. After a while, he serves a dish and explains that it is called ramen. When they try it, they find it extremely delicious and cannot stop eating it. However, when Senku tastes it, he finds it clearly not very good and says he could not expect much from something like millet. Later, he creates a ramen cart and goes in front of the village entrance to attract the villagers' attention. This causes many villagers to come and try the food, and they are delighted by the taste of the ramen. However, Kohaku's father refuses to approve of the idea and remains firm. Shortly after, an unknown person tries the ramen and says it makes him want to drink something like a cola. Seeing this, Kohaku asks Senku if that person is with him, and he replies that he is not. This makes her call the others to quickly surround the boy and interrogate him, asking if he is with the long-haired man. The boy replies that he doesn't know anyone like that. Upon a closer look, Senku recognizes him as Gen Asagiri, a magician who wrote trash psychology books, and it is revealed that he is the author of the book used earlier for the psychology test about who to choose to save after an accident. Hearing this, Gen is pleased that someone read his book but prefers to be called a mentalist. He then begins telling them to lower their weapons because his hands are shaking and he doesn't want to drop the ramen. However, Kohaku does not believe anything he says, noticing that he is not very scared and that everything he says weighs as little as a feather. After that, Senku tells him that it doesn't matter, but everyone who eats ramen must work. Later, many of them start blowing air to heat the oven, which is now a level 2 oven. It is then that Gen tells Senku that he cannot be fooled and that his idea is to tire him out in order to make him talk. And he mentions that for a job like this, Taihu is the best option. This makes Senku ask him why he suddenly admits that he's with Tsukasa, and Gen replies that things have changed now that he has seen what they are doing. Later he tells him that his job is to pretend that Senku is dead, and if Tsukasa is informed that he's alive, he'll be completely lost, but if he completes his iron weapons, who knows who will win. On the other hand, the boys finally create an iron bar, and Gen also gives a false report to Tsukasa, saying that he can save Senku and that he doesn't have any policy, and that the most superficial man in the world is him. So whether he or Tsukasa dies, it's all the same to him, and he can't decide if it's better to let the Kingdom of Science win or Tsukasa's empire, since on that side, there are many interesting scientific things, ramen and all that, but the work is terrible. Meanwhile, in Tsukasa's empire, there's no science and the food is simple, but the work is very easy. After hearing him, Kohaku says that people like him are better off dead or locked up, but Senku stops her and explains that if they don't let him return, Tsukasa will come there in person and everything will end. He asks her to relax and says that when they see what they'll do with their new iron, he'll want to join the Kingdom of Science 100 billion%. Then he tells her what he'll make, a generator, and that with copper they'll create wires and they need some lightning. Right after that, a huge thunderstorm approaches. This alarms Senku and he warns that it's not good at all since they're clearly not prepared, and he tells Gen that he can make a generator with magnets and that they have to use a lightning rod to catch them and make a powerful magnet with science. It was going to be a bunch of lightning rods, but he can't miss this opportunity, so they'll prepare them immediately to avoid wasting any more time. Once he starts working on it, he explains that Kohaku's shield is covered with lacquer and that there must be some in the village. So Suika quickly heads there and brings back a container of lacquer. There, Senku mentions that it's a very good insulator, and with that they cover the iron bar. After that, they remove the wooden plank from the bridge that connects to the village, which is clearly seen by a little girl from there. Then Kohaku makes a channel in the plank, and copper is poured into that channel. Afterward, the solidified copper is wrapped around the iron. Meanwhile, the girl from the village warns the others that the outsiders are destroying the bridge. A muscular man then finally sees that they're showing their evil intentions and heads there with other men. When Chrome sees him, he realizes that it's magma and that he won't listen to reason. But Senku says that they'll be doomed if they go to war with the village now. Facing Magma and the others, he shows them flowers and explains that they came to stop the lightning with their sorcery, and suddenly he makes the flowers disappear from his hands right before their eyes, which leaves everyone astonished. Seeing this, Senku says that it's called the backhand trick or something like that. After seeing that, Magma and the others realize that the lightning from the storm is getting worse and decide to retreat. Shortly after, Senku mentions that old Wasilewski at NASA had already succeeded in making magnets with lightning, and they climb to the top of a small rocky mountain to gain height, but they see that they don't have time since the lightning bolts are approaching very, very fast. At that moment, Kohaku sees Kinro's golden spear, though he begs her to take anything but his spear. Despite this, she quickly takes it from him and with great skill manages to stab it into the stone ground and ties the iron bar to the tip. That's when a powerful lightning bolt strikes the iron, and Senku, while holding it, declares that electricity is born with an explosion. Shortly after, Kohaku tells Senku that the magnets don't work because she can't make them stick and they don't attract each other. But seeing it, he explains that it's because the poles are reversed, and by flipping one of the magnets, they make them stick together with great force. Then he tells Gen that the generator they'll make will be powered by muscle strength, so they'll prepare the copper by hammering it flat and cutting it until it becomes a disc. Chrome says he'll hit it with corundum, and Senku mentions that it's the second hardest mineral after diamond. Then he says he thought of coating the copper wire with phosphoric acid, and it also helps to bathe it in lacquer. He explains to Gen that his face is swollen because he's allergic to lacquer. After an entire day of work, he manages to create a double hand generator, which requires 2 people to spin the discs in sync, or the generator will break apart. So they decide to go convince Kinro and Jinro to help them, but Gen goes ahead and persuades them by saying that with electricity, they'll be able to make spears of gold and silver, and that's enough for them to agree to work on the generator. There, Senku shows Gen steamed bamboo fiber. Later, Gen realizes that it's an Edison bulb with Japanese bamboo. After that, Senku connects the wires to both poles of the copper, and with that, he manages to create a strong light that illuminates the whole place, leaving Gen completely astonished as he can't stop staring at the light like a mosquito drawn to a bulb. Now they show us Senku's past again, when he was a child, where it's said that the first biography he read since he started looking into science books was Edison's, and he also discovered that there are only 4 fundamental forces in the universe. Then, after researching more, he understands that electricity is the most essential power in the universe. Returning to the present, Senku tells Chrome, Kohaku, and Suika about Tsukasa, and that he's the one responsible for the attempted assassination of Senku, and that Gen is neither good nor bad, since he follows whatever benefits him, and they explain that they need him on their side in the Kingdom of Science, and that they need him to give a false report to Tsukasa about his death, since only that way can they win. This makes Chrome shout to Gen about how awesome electricity is, and that the Kingdom of Science is much more fun now, but Gen replies that he's the most superficial man in the world, and only cares about whether he benefits or not. Now they show us the moment when he was revived. There, Tsukasa made him know that it was the year 5530 after Christ, but even so, he's only 19 years old, and Gen recognizes him when he sees that Tsukasa was also with him in the psychological magic special, and that he was known as the strongest primate student. Then Tsukasa explains that he's gathering there the statues of the people who should be revived first, and it's shown that they are only statues of very muscular and intimidating men. After that, he tells him what his plan is for his empire, where everyone will be free, and that there's something he needs him to do as the mentalist he already is, which consists of following the primitive people and discovering their psychology. And just in case, if a man named Senku is still alive, he wants him to find him, that Senku was the first one to be revived, and that he used the power of science in that place to undo the petrification, and that he's clearly the one who had revived him, but that he wanted to revive all humanity, including the filthy old people, thus creating a civilization that makes scientific weapons, and that he killed him with his own hands, and that he was the most intelligent man in the world. Now in the present, Gen, being alone outside, is repeatedly attacked by a very muscular man who gives him powerful blows, and without seeing who it is, they end up stabbing a spear into his chest. Because of the noise, the others become alarmed and approach, finding him lying on the ground all injured, but when Senku examines him, he sees that he had covered himself with a bag of fake blood and had it all over his body just in case. After that, they treat his wounds and see that although he's still alive, he's badly hurt, and they wonder who could have been the person who attacked him. This makes Suika decide to go investigate on her own. The next day, she comes to Senku and tells him who the culprit was, and it's shown that during the night she found Magma talking about how easy it was to get rid of the sorcerer, and that it was a shame not to have finished off Ohaku. But now that he's gotten rid of her sorcerer ally, Kohaku will only be just another girl, and that if they apologize, he doesn't mind making Ruri his as well.